Thank you, Minister. So no new local cases today and just one case in hotel quarantine. Of our current outbreaks, we're really nearing the final clearance stages for the City of Whittlesea, Port Melbourne, West Melbourne and Arcare Maidstone outbreaks. In fact, Arcare Maidstone's been stood down as an outbreak. The really dedicated focus on the Kings Park townhouse complex continues, with no further cases there amongst those who've been routinely tested over the last few days. I am pleased we're in a much more stable position with our outbreaks, allowing us to take another cautious step open. But what I stress is it's not a signal that it's all behind us. There are continuing challenges through this winter and this week. There are things we have to do on top of observing the current restrictions through to 11:59 Thursday and the revised settings after that. As the Minister said, check in everywhere you go, every time. Getting tested if you have symptoms. Getting vaccinated when you can, including and especially getting your second dose. And getting a border permit if you're coming to Victoria. On permits, at 1 o'clock this morning, the following local government areas became red zones under our travel permit system. They were previously orange zones. They include City of Sydney, Waverley, Woollahra, Bayside, Canada Bay, Inner West and Randwick. And there's one additional orange zone, and that's Wollongong. I don't make these decisions lightly, nor do I make them in a bubble. I've been speaking every day on HPPC with my Chief Health Officer counterparts and officers in their public health units, in particular in Queensland and New South Wales. We constantly share information about the emerging risk profiles of outbreaks, the exposure sites, the transmission events, to give us as much clarity as we can get to make decisions based on, protecting Victorians as my primary focus. If you are a Victorian resident and have been in a red zone from 1 a.m. Today, other than for transit purposes, you can obtain a red zone permit to enter Victoria, but you'll be required to quarantine for 14 days. If you are a non-Victorian resident and you've been in a red zone, again, other than for transit, you cannot obtain a permit and you cannot enter Victoria. You must have a valid permit, exception or exemption to enter Victoria. Those exemptions are still available to apply for. If you try to enter Victoria at a land border from a red zone without a permit, you'll be sent back. If you enter at an airport or seaport from a red zone without a permit, you'll be fined and you'll stay in hotel quarantine until return transport is arranged. In addition, if you've been to a high-risk exposure site requiring you to quarantine for 14 days, you can't get a permit to enter Victoria. And if you have symptoms, you shouldn't be travelling anywhere. You really should be getting a test and isolating until a negative comes back. We're seeing a high degree of compliance of people arriving from Sydney with the correct orange zone permits that have been in place up until now. And so thanks to all of those individuals coming in and getting those permits, getting tested and getting their negative result. We've got high levels of negative results for all of those individuals. We will keep monitoring the situation interstate every day, and you can see more information about the zones, including a map online at coronavirus.vic.gov.au. I think we're happy to take questions now.
Second shot Pfizer doses. You mentioned yesterday there's heaps of slots, but there are heaps of people getting in touch with us. They can't get bookings. What do you think the problem is?
Look, there are slots available. I know that there are booking slots available as well as the capacity within the system. So I'm not sure exactly what the issue might be for some people, but we do know that for those who are due this week, that we've got a capacity to provide that vaccine and that there are available slots in the online booking system.
Do you think people have been scared off by the AstraZeneca stuff last week?
I think some people, have been a bit spooked by the changes to the AstraZeneca vaccine. I've been as clear as I can be that was a ATAGI advice. It's pretty conservative advice. It is based on the risk of those very rare events of significant clots. Only 3% of all of the cases that we've detected in Australia have ended in fatality. That's very different to the situation overseas. We are picking up more cases. We're picking up cases that are milder, and we're picking them up earlier, and we know more about the treatment and management. They still remain rare events even to occur in the first place. For second doses of AstraZeneca, they're probably an order of magnitude rarer again. So I'll be stepping up for my second dose of AstraZeneca. I would encourage others to do the same, and if they've got those concerns, to talk them through with their health provider. On Pfizer, it's a very, very safe vaccine, and second dose, the same. So for that full protection, and understanding that Australia is not out of this pandemic by any stretch, people really should get it.
But there's got to be some problem with the booking system. It's not new that people ring a radio station and say, I can't get a booking. You've got the slots. Can you do anything to fix that? Look,
we can come back to you on what those specific issues might be for some individuals. I'm not aware of whether it's a technical issue or whether it's the approach they're going for their second booking.
Just on the restrictions and the decision to hold them for 2 weeks, how much of that is based on our situation? Is it also based on what's happening in New South Wales?
Yeah, look, of course it has to be. We'll always do that horizon scanning to understand the risk of cases coming into Victoria. We'll have our own kind of settings in terms of protecting Victoria from, potential interstate travellers who might be carrying the virus. That's largely managed through the permit system, but it has some relationship to the settings, but by and large, these settings relate to the epidemiology in Victoria, the greater confidence we're getting each and every day with no new cases, with community exposures, and the high testing numbers that, again, give us that full picture that we're in an increasingly good position.
And people would have been keen to see masks go indoors. They're obviously staying. Are you able to explain why that is?
Look, it's part of what allows us to do what we're doing. The 50% for some of these public events indoors where people sit in close proximity for hours at a time, some of the other big public events, but also, and we've seen it through Victoria's outbreak, we're seeing it now in New South Wales, that retail settings allow transmission to occur. Other indoor settings are the risk areas. So we do need to bear in mind that that's a level of insurance, a level of protection that allows us to go to the very settings that we're trying to get to.
There was a hope for hospitality that some of that density limiting would be reduced, maybe from 4 square metres to 2, because the cap still doesn't help some of those really big venues. Why not now? Why isn't the time for that?
Look, it has in the sense that at the 600 square metre, if there's COVID marshals, that you can get to that 1 per 2 square metre density, and for those 25 and under businesses, that there's no density quotient at all. I think that includes a really significant proportion of the hospitality sector, and it is bearing in mind, the challenge of having a density quotient for those small businesses, and so, that's absolutely been part of our thinking.
Do you anticipate in 2 weeks' time we'll be back at the settings that were in place prior to this outbreak?
I would hope so. Look, that's clearly, again, our aspiration. We need to see it play out over the week ahead and fortnight ahead. But wouldn't it be good if we can get there?
So why 2 weeks are you waiting for? Because since we've seen 6 days with 1 case or fewer, what's...
Look, it is providing that certainty over the school holiday period. This is what we're flagging as the settings over that 14-day period. That doesn't mean that review process doesn't happen every day, in particular at those weekly intervals where we can, make those considerations about potentially going another step further. But this is what we're flagging for now.
Are you waiting for any tests, Professor, on concerning travellers from New South Wales who might have come back before the border was shut, who may have been at an exposure site and may have not immediately quarantined in Victoria? Are there any cases that are concerning who are waiting on test results?
No, not more than anyone else arriving from an orange zone. Obviously, everyone from those 7 LGAs prior to 1 a.m. Fall into that category of orange zone arrivals, and we do ask them to isolate, get a test, and get that negative result. The change to red zone is a reflection of the additional cases, additional transmission risk in those zones.
And just on the ATAGI decision, you just called it conservative. The Deputy Premier went to this point last week, but do you or Alan Cheng in ATAGI, I'm sure he has to wear a national hat, but do you kind of advocate for the Victorian position on these kinds of decisions? I mean, we are particularly harmed by it, given we're going into winter, just coming out of a lockdown. it's hit us hard at a terrible time. Are you making the case for how urgent the vaccine situation is in Victoria?
Certainly I am. These are super tricky decisions for ATAGI. They are making an assessment of risk, the clinical risk of a rare but serious side effect from AstraZeneca vaccines against the best estimate that they can make about the risk of people being exposed to coronavirus. They are very tricky estimates to come up with on the risk of exposure to coronavirus because we simply don't know what the next few months might hold. I'm certainly of the view that, getting high vaccination coverage is our genuine protection and that the risk is not insubstantial of significant outbreaks through the winter period while we've still got low vaccine coverage. So, yes, we make those points to ATAGI. ATAGI are a technical advisory group on vaccine safety and efficacy. They have to bear in mind their decisions around confidence in the vaccine and what it means for the individual who's stepping forward to receive that vaccine. They are not easy decisions by any means.
Was there a lack of consideration in your mind on the implications of their decision?
No, not a lack of consideration at all. They will have their perspectives with their specific role that they have to play as ATAGI. We come with a broader population health perspective. We provide that information, but they are the decision makers with respect to those vaccine choices. In part, it's less about the vaccine and it's more about the communication challenge. And so we will continue to provide as much information, advice, engagement and motivation for people to continue to choose AstraZeneca where it's appropriate to do so, as well as stepping up for the Pfizer vaccine. Vaccination coverage with either vaccine is still critically important. So even those specific decisions around Pfizer being preferred for particular age cohorts have been made, that doesn't mean that AstraZeneca is out of the picture. People can and should, as I will, still get vaccinated with AstraZeneca.
In Sydney, there's 16 new cases today. I know we've talked about Sydney, but just how concerning is that latest outbreak there?
Oh, look, no one wants to see more cases in Sydney. The Delta variant is the worst variant on many measures in the world today. And so with its greater transmissibility, greater risk of hospitalisation and some ability to escape the immune protection of vaccines, it's a triple whammy of threat. Again, don't want to overplay that, but that is enough just in terms of factual elements about the Delta variant that means that no one should underestimate the challenge and no one should underestimate the importance of getting on top of it.
Are you surprised that Sydney hasn't been into the lockdown?
Look, it's not for me to be surprised or otherwise. New South Wales authorities have all of the information before them. They make decisions as they see fit. They have got a situation where they understood their index case, the very first case, and they've been following the close contacts and the contacts of contacts from that first case onwards. That is less of a challenge, if you like, than what we faced in Victoria, where we had a few generations of transmission, identified a mystery case, and within 3 days had 24 cases identified who'd already had transmission to them, before we even had that first diagnosis. That was a particular challenge for Victoria. But it's for New South Wales to make those decisions based on what they see.
If you had that many mystery cases that quickly, would you lock down?
Look, we would always make the decisions based on what we see. I don't have the full suite of information that New South Wales has, and I can't just supplant Sydney's situation into Melbourne. We've got different demographics. Sometimes with the cases that occur, we've got different situations in terms of where it spreads and how it spreads. We would make decisions based on what we are confronted with, as would any jurisdiction.
Was that our last lockdown, or is it still a lockdown still an option in Victoria?
I've always said we have to have available to us all of the tools that are required to get ahead of this virus. I hope that we're in a situation where we've got such high vaccination coverage that we never have to consider a lockdown. But if that is what's required based on what we're confronted with, I wouldn't want to set it aside as never being available to us as a tool and locking us ideologically into a corner that means that we can't respond appropriately.
Do you think people would cop another lockdown? Do you think people would actually tolerate it?
People were appropriately angrier, more frustrated, more fatigued, more fed up with this lockdown than maybe previously. We all hate it. We all absolutely hate it. Who wants it? But I will always make the case that if it's what's required to get us to the position that we are in today, to get the settings again that we're looking at, then we have to do it in those specific circumstances, and only when we have to do it, not out of some desire to be in lockdown. Nobody wants it.
There has been some criticism of you today about how much notice you gave regarding those red zones in New South Wales. Can you talk us through why it is only a matter of hours and why maybe that's not explained a bit more succinctly, I suppose, to the people?
Look, I think we've always said that these circumstances can change very rapidly. Those new cases yesterday in New South Wales were only available to us through the course of yesterday to make an assessment of. It's fair to say we had 7 local government areas that had already been declared as orange zones. That's a bit of a flag that there's transmission in those areas, that there are cases in those areas, and that there's an increased risk of them potentially going to red. But we'll make the call as required in order to protect Victorians.
Can I ask the Acting Premier a question, if I might? Dance floors are still closed throughout Greater Melbourne, and that means that people, although they can have their...
I think I got our wires crossed before, where I was saying about weddings, and the number's obviously really large, 300 people, that many can't be in a pub, but no dance floor and no masks. Did you factor in the fact that a lot of couples would say they still don't want to have their wedding under those circumstances in raising that number so high? It seems very high, considering it's not likely to actually result in many events.
Yeah, look, it's the cap, and clearly if people want a smaller event or feel comfortable with a smaller event, they're entirely free to do so. But we are comfortable with that as an upper limit, as it were.
But there's not many people that will get married under those circumstances. Do you acknowledge that? Without a dance floor, without a bridal party dance, with everyone wearing masks at an event like that?
Yeah, look, I understand that that's not to everyone's approval, but those are the conditions that were assessed as required to manage the risk in an event of that size and with the kind of activities that take place there.
And just on the Sydney A-League players, technically they shouldn't be allowed to fly here, but are they flying here under a work exemption, and will they have to quarantine?
I haven't seen an exemption come to me, or I'm not aware of one going to the exemptions team. That might be coming through the works, but I'm not aware of it.
So they are coming here to play?
If that's what they've announced, then so be it, but I haven't seen anything approved.
But would you require them to be exempt?
If they've been in red zones post 1 a.m. Today, yes.
Cohorts get vaccinated, that we can have like our certificate of vaccination and maybe be able to travel interstate?
Yeah, I hope so. Again, I've said a few times, I think it needs to be nationally agreed. I think we need to understand what we mean in terms of fully vaccinated and what allowances would be agreed under those circumstances. But I don't see an issue with that. You'd want it able to be validated. You would not want a black market in certificates to occur, and you would not want vilification or stigmatisation of those who may not be able to get vaccinated. So lots of complex issues in that space, but there should be a recognition, I think, over time that people who are fully vaccinated genuinely represent a lesser risk of transmission.
Acting Premier, when will we see concerts and festivals return, and given it will be one of the last sectors to reopen, will there be additional financial support for those industries?
The expert to answer that question.
Look, it's always a judgment call, as for any setting, but dance floors are that opportunity for people to be in close contact. There's exertion, and there's the opportunity for a number of people who don't necessarily know each other to be in close contact and potentially transmitting to each other. It's a higher risk setting, it's a higher risk activity than some of the other things that we've flagged.
Have you factored in the fact that no dance floors and masks still need to be inside? 300 seems like a big number for weddings, particularly when some pubs can't even have that many people in there. Are you sort of anticipating that people aren't really going to do it anyway?
Look, we always hope that people do the right thing. We are making those caps bearing in mind how people might behave, but we always hope that they do the right thing. The wedding settings are a balance of understanding the risk of transmission there, but also the importance of those events that have been deferred for many weeks now to be able to go ahead, in particular regional Victorian settings.
So just to confirm, you are having a wedding, you can't have a dance floor even for the bridal party?
That's right. That's right.
Let's ask on testing.
Given the kind of the reinforced importance and how it was a key factor in sparking this outbreak was people not getting tested, are you guys looking at measures to increase? I think I've forgotten the term. Is it sentinel testing? We talked about this last year. You know, testing at work sites, testing at GPs, just doing surveillance testing to ensure that people are being picked up.
Look, it's always under consideration. The modelling that has looked into sentinel testing suggests that it's a pretty low value activity, especially with zero to low probability of community transmission. The focus should be on symptomatic individuals, and so sentinel testing where people don't have symptoms, even though they're potentially at-risk settings or you've got a captive audience for testing, are very low value. You have to do hundreds of thousands of tests to pick up a potential case. So it's not out of the question, but in a zero to very low prevalence of the virus, it's not a good value for money prospect.
So we're not doing any workplace testing or anything like that?
Look,
anymore?
it's happening in our healthcare settings in particular, but we know that we've got cases who need transfer out of hotel quarantine who are going to be in acute care settings, and so it's present there.
Has home quarantine come up since we last asked about it, either at HPPC or anywhere else?
Yeah, it continues to be discussed. Again, modelling to try and work out what various models might do with respect to risk. It is that combination of the country of origin, whether you're a vaccinated individual or not, whether it's a 7 or 14-day quarantine, and the volume of people that come through, and whether you can do the compliance checks for 50% of those people or 90% of those people or 100%. So lots of dimensions to explore there.
Vaccine misinformation. There's a flyer going around Bendigo today saying that it's not safe to go and get vaccinated. We've obviously seen that before, but is enough being done from either our level or from a federal level to try and convince people and reassure them that it is safe to go and get vaccinated?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of information's total bunkum, obviously. We need to continue to work really hard to set right misinformation and disinformation. It does seem to spread like wildfire through particular social media networks, not the platforms per se, but the particular networks of people who are trying to amplify this misinformation. We need to be in that space and correcting that misinformation and directing people to appropriate and trusted sources. We are working on that all of the time. I would say if you see information online, do not accept it as gospel truth just because it's come from someone within your network. We trust our GPs, we trust our medical professionals and nursing professionals, nurse immunisers, because they are best placed to understand the information about vaccines. And so please go to them with any and all concerns that you have, and they'll be able to address that.
At this time last week, you were saying you were still concerned about mystery cases out in the community. Is that still a fear of yours that there could be coronavirus lurking around?
Look, I guess it's part of what we're saying here about QR check-ins, about testing for anyone who's symptomatic, and about still getting vaccinated. We can't be sure at any point, really. So although the risk is looking better and better each and every day, it's not to say that this is behind us by any means.
Acting Premier, can I ask about the A-League Grand Final? Melbourne City playing Sydney City. Presumably some of the players and staff have been in red zones.